Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a really fascinating concept, translocation, or what we're calling the dynamic plant economy. You know, there's actually a hidden, bustling economy happening right inside every single plant you see. It's all about how they strategically move their food and nutrients around just to survive and thrive. Okay, let's dive right into this. So here's the big question. How exactly do plants transport food in multiple directions? I mean, we all know that plants pull water up from their roots, right? But getting the food they literally make up in their leaves all the way down to those roots, or say up to a newly forming flower, well, that requires a completely different, highly specialized biological system. It's this beautiful, complex, multidirectional puzzle.
Section 1. The Nutrient Highway.
Let's think of a plant not just as this static green object sitting in the dirt, but as a seriously busy highway system. The strict biological definition of translocation is the movement of sucrose and amino acids in the phloem from sources to sinks. Now, you really want to notice those specific terms there. We aren't just broadly moving some generic sugar around. We are specifically moving sucrose and amino acids. The highway itself is this intricate tissue network called the phloem, and the starting points and destinations? Well, those are our sources and sinks. Locking down this exact terminology is absolutely crucial for truly understanding how this whole economy operates. Now, you've likely heard of transpiration before, right? That's the movement of water and minerals through the xylem vessels, and it goes strictly one way, from the roots straight up to the leaves. But translocation, it's an entirely different beast. Translocation moves dissolved sucrose and amino acids through the phloem, and crucially, it is bidirectional, meaning it goes both upwards and downwards. This core difference, xylem versus phloem, one-way versus bidirectional, is a vital distinction you really need to grasp for sure. Section 2. Sources versus sinks. So we know these nutrients are moving back and forth, but where exactly are they coming from? Let's look at the producers. A source is any part of the plant that releases sucrose or amino acids into our highway system. And this happens in two main ways. First, through regions of production. Think of the palisade mesophyll tissue up in the leaves, where photosynthesis is happening in real time. Second, through storage areas. So something like a tuber acts a lot like a biological savings account, releasing its stored sucrose into the phloem whenever the plant really needs a boost. Okay, now we pivot to the destinations, the sinks. Sinks are the parts of the plant that are actively receiving that sucrose and those amino acids. These are typically areas of active growth. We're talking developing seeds, new baby leaves, and blossoming flowers that desperately need that energy to build themselves. But sinks can also be storage vaults. Roots, stems, tubers, and bulbs act as sinks when they actively receive nutrients just to tuck them away for later use. Let's actually walk through a concrete biological example of this economy in action. Step 1. Sucrose is produced up in our leaf sources. Step 2. It enters the highway, getting transported via the phloem down to sinks, like the roots or the stem. But here's the really clever part in Step 3. Once that soluble sucrose arrives at the sink, it gets converted into an insoluble molecule called starch. And by making it insoluble, the plant can safely store it away in bulk without totally disrupting the delicate water balance in its cells. Honestly, it's a highly efficient survival mechanism. Section 3. The Great Role Reversal. So here is the massive twist in our story. In the plant world, the job titles of source and sink are not permanently fixed. They are completely adaptable. Remember when we talked about the phloem being a two-way street? Well, this bidirectional movement depends entirely on the season or what the plant specifically requires at that exact moment. The plant is constantly auditing its own economy. If nutrients need to go up to fuel a brand new flower, they move upwards. If they need to be pushed downwards into the roots to prep for winter, they move down. The plant dynamically dictates the entire flow. Let's look at a fantastic real-world example of this, the coming-of-age story of a simple leaf. A leaf actually begins its life at step 1 as a newly forming bud. At this stage, it's a net nutrient sink. It literally can't produce enough for itself, so it has to pull carbohydrates from the rest of the plant just to breathe and grow. Then, as the leaf develops into step 2, its rate of photosynthesis rises. Finally, by step 3, it becomes a fully mature leaf. It completely flips its identity from a needy consumer to a net nutrient source, proudly supplying sucrose and amino acids back out to the rest of the plant. A potato tuber experiences a really interesting journey of its own. A developing tuber starts off in step 1 as a massive sink, just hungrily taking up sucrose and converting it into that insoluble starch we talked about for storage underground. But watch what happens in step 2. When the season changes and new leaves need to grow above ground, the plant's requirements shift. The tuber receives the signal,
And by step 3, this mature tuber wakes up and becomes a source. It actively converts its stored insoluble starch right back into soluble sucrose. That sucrose then enters the phloem and moves all the way up the stem to fuel the new buds. It is a perfect, closed-loop system of recycling and redistribution. So we've seen how incredibly dynamic this process really is. Plants aren't just sitting idle, They're actively managing a complex, bidirectional nutrient highway, swapping the roles of sources and sinks to survive whatever the seasons throw at them. Which leaves us with a pretty fascinating final thought. If a plant acts like a bustling bidirectional economy to transport its vital nutrients, how does this all compare to our very own human circulatory systems? How do our bodies manage our own biological sources and sinks? Keep that question in mind as you continue exploring biology. It's been fantastic guiding you through this explainer today. Stay curious and keep learning.